Monster Hunter 1 is 20 years old and so is the series. Since its release, a lot of things about the Monster Hunter series have changed and evolved. We've seen a lot of cool stuff being added throughout the years. We've seen the introduction of feline comrades in Monster Hunter Freedom Unite, which are now called palicos in the most recent games. We've seen the very controversial underwater mechanic come and go with Monster Hunter Tri and Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, as well as the introduction of the Switch Axe back in 2010. And last but not least, we witnessed the series mature with the introduction of aerial moves and the mounting mechanic, which were introduced back in 2015 with Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate and later perfected in Monster Hunter World. Adding on to that, two new weapons which later became two of the most popular weapons in Monster Hunter history were introduced in the form of the Charge Blade and the Insect Glaive. And how could I forget about the most interesting and important mechanics introduced in the last few games? Monster Hunter World's Clutch Claw mechanic and Monster Hunter Rise's Wire Bug mechanic. Love them or hate them, these two mechanics are probably among the main reasons why Monster Hunter is so popular right now. But still, even with all of these quality of life improvements, I want to go 20 years back to 2004 and talk about the first Monster Hunter game, Monster Hunter 1 for the PlayStation 2. Hi, I'm Asteria and I've been playing Monster Hunter games for over 10 years now. And in today's video, I thought it would be interesting to compare Monster Hunter 1's controls to the latest generation's controls. So join me as I talk about this game's interesting control layout. Just to get this out of the way, if you guys like my videos, please leave a like, subscribe, and ring the bell. It would really help my channel, and you would get notified whenever I upload a new video, create a community post, or when I go live here on YouTube. And also, if you're interested in becoming a member of my YouTube channel, that would be awesome. If you choose to become a member of my YouTube channel, you'll be able to use emojis on my live streams, you'll get a special Discord role on my Discord server, and last but not least, you'll get a shout out at the end of every video. If that's something that interests you, click the join button on this video to support my channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get back to the video. Just a small disclaimer before we start, I'll be talking about this game's control layout in comparison to Monster Hunter World since I do not own Monster Hunter Rise. Also, while explaining the controls, I'll use Blade Master and Gunner examples to better illustrate the differences between both games. However, I won't cover every single weapon type as it would result in a longer video. I'll talk about this game's weapon types in future videos though. The main objective of this video is to compare Monster Hunter 1's controls to Monster Hunter World's controls. But before we do that, I'm going to talk about Monster Hunter 1 in the context of the gaming world in the year 2004. Monster Hunter 1 was released in the first half of the 2000s, in a time when taking risks was the name of the game. If you're familiar with this era of gaming, and especially the year this game came out in, you'll probably have a list of games in your head that'll make you feel immediately nostalgic. When I think about this year in gaming, and more specifically the PlayStation 2, a few games that left a big impression on me come to mind. Tony Hawk's Underground, Need for Speed Underground 2, and Jak 3, just to name a few. These three games are known for having really good controls. Ensuring that your game had pretty tight controls back then was a major selling point. Some would even say a priority. When Monster Hunter 1 released back in 2004 in the West, a lot of people struggled to play it because of its simulation-style control scheme. That was probably one of the main reasons why it didn't sell so well outside of Japan. The game not having a story and being a hardcore hunting simulation-style RPG also didn't really help a lot either. When talking about simulation games, Gran Turismo comes to mind. At this point in time, in the early 2000s, Gran Turismo was a really well-established series, with 3 games already released and a lot of hype behind the 4th game. But let's be honest, every racing game that came out around this time, including Gran Turismo, did really well because racing games are a really easy concept to grasp. So much so that even kids like me at the time could play these types of games and understand them. But a game series that wasn't at all established yet and didn't have a lot of hype behind it, at least here in the West, was Monster Hunter. No one knew what to expect from Capcom, and looking at the gameplay footage, you'd assume just by watching the trailer that the game would be kind of an action game or something, not a complex hunting simulation action RPG with messed up controls. Still, the game did fairly well in Japan, cultivating a dedicated audience at a time when MMORPGs were in the rise. The main reason for this game's success in Japan was because of this game's online play feature. That's right, Monster Hunter has been a multiplayer focused experience since the beginning. And the game that heavily influenced Monster Hunter 1's online gameplay experience was actually Sonic Team's Phantasy Star Online, a game that also had an interesting control scheme, but a more refined one at that. 4-player multiplayer, and the feature that every Monster Hunter game has had since the first game, the quest system, where hunters accept a quest, complete it, and then are teleported back to the main hub to repeat the cycle. There are more similarities between both of these games, but these are just the main ones. Anyway, there are two main reasons why Monster Hunter 1 wasn't more popular in the West than it should have been. Number 1, Monster Hunter 1 was a hardcore RPG, which was a type of game and a concept that Western audiences had a tough time grasping at that point in time. And number 2, the game had a really specific control layout. It's safe to say that the game would have sold much better back then if it had a more standardized control scheme. But at the same time, I wouldn't be talking about it and doing this video if they hadn't made that decision. PlayStation 2 Monster Hunter games can be a really polarizing topic in the Monster Hunter community. Most of the time when people ask veterans about Generation 1 and what Gen 1 game to pick and start playing, they'll get two different answers from the community. Just play Monster Hunter Freedom 1 instead if you're that interested. Or, why would you play Gen 1? If you really want a good old Monster Hunter experience, just try Monster Hunter Freedom Unite instead. I know that a lot of people dismiss Monster Hunter 1 as a viable Generation 1 experience because it doesn't have the additional content that Monster Hunter G and Monster Hunter Freedom 1 introduced, and also because of the controls obviously, which don't get me wrong, I also don't like them one bit. But I think that if you're a big fan of the Monster Hunter series, you should try playing these games at least once in your life. Well, that's enough backstory and rambling about the game. Let's actually talk about the controls now. So, what are the major differences in controls between Monster Hunter 1 and Monster Hunter World? There are quite a few differences in controls between both games actually. But let's first talk about what they have in common, specifically in the gameplay department. In both games, you move around using the left analog stick obviously, and to consume items you use the square button. To reset the camera for both games, you press L1. And besides using the start button to bring up the start menu, that's basically where the similarities end. Let's now talk about the differences in gameplay. To run with your character in Monster Hunter 1, you press R2. The equivalent in Monster Hunter World is pressing R1 while moving. To dodge an attack in Monster Hunter 1, you press circle. But to dodge a monster's attack in Monster Hunter World, you press X instead. In Monster Hunter 1, to climb a ledge, carve a monster, or collect an item from an item spot, you press the X button. In Monster Hunter World, the equivalent to that is pressing the circle button. In Monster Hunter 1, you hold L2 to bring up the item selection window, and you press the square or circle buttons to cycle through your items. But in Monster Hunter World, instead of using L2, you hold the L1 button to bring up the same menu. The square and circle buttons in this game are also used to cycle through items. One last thing before I forget about it, in Monster Hunter 1, you can either use the square or X buttons to sheath your melee or gunner weapons. The Monster Hunter World equivalent is to either press the square button or to run with R1 and quickly sheath your weapon. Now let's talk about the fun stuff. In Monster Hunter 1, to draw your melee weapon and also attack, you flick the right analog stick in any vertical or horizontal direction. In Monster Hunter World, to attack with your melee weapon, you press triangle or circle. In Monster Hunter 1, to charge a hammer attack or defend against a monster attack with the greatsword, you press R1 in this game. But in Monster Hunter World, you press R2 to do the same action. And speaking about the greatsword, in this game there are no charge attacks for the greatsword. So yeah, there's no TCS or mid-air charge attacks, which makes me really sad because I'm a greatsword player. But hey, at least there's a greatsword in this game, you know? There's also a special attack that you can do with certain weapons. By pressing R3, you can kick with your greatsword out. It's actually really funny. You can also do it in Monster Hunter World by pressing triangle while defending with R2. Let's move on to gunner weapons now. Flicking the right analog stick in any direction will draw your weapon. And to fire your weapon, each time that you need to fire a bullet, you press R3. That's messed up. To change bullets in this game, bring up the item selection menu with L2 and cycle through the different ammo with either triangle or X buttons. And to reload your bowgun, you have to flick the analog down. Also, to bring up the crosshair, you hold down L1, and to zoom in, you press the R1 button. And to move the crosshair while zoomed in, you can either use the D-pad or the left analog stick. Just like the greatsword, both bowgun types also have a special attack. While your weapon is drawn, flick the right analog stick up. This will perform a melee attack. Now, because they already use the right analog stick for attacks, the only buttons left for the camera are actually the D-pad. That's right, the D-pad in this game controls the camera. I probably don't need to say this, but in World, you move the camera with the right analog stick, which is a gaming standard at this point. But what about Monster Hunter World? How different are the gunner controls in Monster Hunter World compared to Monster Hunter 1? They are pretty much worlds apart, no pun intended. In Monster Hunter World, you can draw any type of weapon with either triangle or R2. To zoom in, you press L2, and to fire your weapon, you press R2. And something that's pretty neat about Monster Hunter World is that you don't need to load any type of ammo. Just choose your preferred ammo type from your ammo list by holding L1 and pressing either triangle or X to choose the ammo type. The ammo that's currently active will be already loaded and ready to go. As an alternative, you can press up or down on your D-pad to cycle through the various ammo types. Pressing the triangle button will reload your weapon, and pressing the circle button will place a Wyvern Blast. A Wyvern Blast is a Lipogun special ammo, which will explode upon impact. A Wyvern Blast is basically a mine, and along with a ton of ammo types, this special ammo is also not featured in Monster Hunter 1. The heavy bowgun equivalent would be turning your gun into a fully automatic rifle, which is freaking badass if you ask me. An additional feature that Monster Hunter World has that isn't present in Monster Hunter 1 is the ability to reload all of your different ammo types by just holding one button. Holding the triangle button in Monster Hunter World will reload every ammo type that needs to be reloaded. Even though this isn't a video about quality of life improvements in the Monster Hunter series, I thought it'd be a really interesting fact to talk about this one. But yeah, I think that's about it. I'm pretty sure that I covered the most important aspects of both of these games' controls, and I'm really sorry if I missed something, but the main objective with this video, in my head at least, was to compare the first gen's controls with the last gen's controls, and to find out how different they actually were. This isn't a, is this game better than that game kind of video, because there's a ton of videos like that out there. I was just genuinely curious to see how different these games actually were in their respective control layouts. Surely, I thought the difference between both of these games would be huge, but I was surprised to find out that there are some similarities between Monster Hunter 1 and Monster Hunter World. The controls in Monster Hunter 1 make sense for the concept of the game, which was more of a simulation type game. Depending on the direction you flick the right analog stick, you usually do an attack related to that movement. For example, if you flick the right analog stick up, you do a front slash on a greatsword. I can understand why they chose this type of control scheme, and even though I was having fun with the game, it can get really frustrating at times. Because on top of being a weird control scheme, the type of quests they throw you in, and the monsters that you need to fight make it 100 times harder. Especially if you're a gunner. I mean, you fire your weapon with R3. Like, seriously, why R3 though? They could have chosen any button on the PlayStation 2 controller, like R1 for example. It would have been so much better, to be honest. I appreciate the vision, but I'll stick with the Monster Hunter World control scheme. But you know what? Even after 20 years, the controls, as weird as they are, they're actually really responsive. And I hate to say this, but I had tons of fun playing through Monster Hunter 1. Sure, it's a slower game, there are only 7 weapon types, and you need to grind a lot, but it was really fun actually. And I recommend everyone to play this game at least once just for the experience. Anyway, I can safely conclude that the series has come a long way. 20 years is no joke for a game series. The fact that Capcom has managed to stay relevant throughout 2 decades is insane to me. 4 different console generations. It's insane. But it's not just Capcom's doing. The Monster Hunter community is one of the most supportive communities in all of gaming. The people's interest in the series speaks volumes. I mean, just look at how World did. And I'm not just talking about revenue. The impact that the game had at the time of its release was something that we probably will never see happening again with this type of game. For a game series about hunting monsters, not too shabby Capcom, you did well. I'm hoping that Wilds has a bigger impact on World, but that remains to be seen. But in my opinion, the more people play Monster Hunter, the better, so just go grab a copy of any Monster Hunter game and just have fun. Anyway, I'm rambling now, so if you like this video, please leave a like and subscribe. It would really help me a lot. And if you're interested in joining my Discord server or becoming a member here on YouTube, the links are going to be in the description of this video. And speaking of Discord, I want to shout out my dude Ian P for boosting the Discord server. What can I say, dude? You're the freaking man. You really didn't have to do that. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. I also want to shout out everyone that watched my Monster Hunter 1 video and the people that liked and subscribed. You guys are freaking awesome. I got a ton of support for that video, so from the bottom of my heart, Thank you so much. Anyways guys, I hope you have a good day. Happy hunting.